Uranium stocks had a good Friday start. We had a big move, but there was a big pullback about 7 a.m. We're going to talk about what exactly happened. There is a lot of bullish news, but some bearish things on the radar we'll talk about. And I'll tell you what I'm doing with my uranium stocks and what my plan is next week. There's a lot to cover in this video, a lot of media coverage. It's been a really exciting week. Give me your like number below. And is this going to be a major issue with the Z plant? Are we going to see another Fukushima disaster? And did you sell out of your uranium stocks? Let me know. Cameco is near an 11-year high. They're about 8% today. But the reason a lot of uranium stocks, and majority of them pulled back right about 7 a.m. was the IAEA released a response to the Z plant. Again, there was a blackout near there, and they were saying there needs to be a ceasefire because the plant is at risk, because they're going to have to go to a diesel generators if this happens, if they shut down the plant. It's like 12 to 13 days or so that they have of diesel. And then they said that there could be a nuclear accident. There is issues if that happens. It's still not likely, in my opinion, that this is going to happen. I don't think Russia or Ukraine wants this to happen. They've already had this issue, but that's why the pullback. But you can see we're near an 11-year high with Cameco, and a lot of the uranium stocks just could not pull back from that. Now, there's a lot of bullish things to cover, and we'll go into this really quickly before we jump into that. But I want to show you the IAEA director, what he said. We'll play the video and I'll give you my response to it. But we can see a lot of the uranium stocks today. UEC, this was when that happened, right? At about 7 a.m., boom, they just dropped. But we started to see a somewhat correction. And we saw this across the board. A lot of uranium stocks like Cameco and Energy Fuels just pretty much broke even for the day. And you can see what exactly happened. Now, I don't think anyone's really talking about this, especially if they're talking heads in uranium, because they're obviously a permeable. Now, I'm very bullish uranium as well, but I know that right now, the reason I am so heavy cash, and I still do have my position, and we'll go into what position I have right now, but I am still heavy cash. And this was the reason really why. You know, there's all these things, the volatility, it's really the way to play it right now for me is the volatility. I know a lot of people did really good today in the Discord, a lot of good trades, and we'll talk about that as well. But you can see a lot of the uranium stocks here on my sheet, on my list. A lot of the uranium stocks were still up today, even though we had this. U.S. producers, I think, are going to have a big upside, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Now, the IAEA director, this was their statement. Like I said, today there is a YouTube video on this, and what better way to hear it than from the man himself? And we'll play this, and I'll give you my response.
Shelling has caused a complete blackout in Energodar and compromised the safety operation of the nearby Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. There is now a low chance that reliable off-site power can be restored. The shelling is putting in danger operators and their families, making it difficult to adequately staff the plant. Together, this has significantly increased the risk of a nuclear accident. Let me be clear. The shelling around Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant must stop, and a nuclear safety and security protection zone agreed immediately. A nuclear power plant can never be a pawn of war. Its fate must not be decided by military means. The consequences of such action are far too grave. The IAEA is at Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant and can facilitate the zone's implementation. There is no time to waste.
This was something that was also pushed on Bloomberg. And, you know, this is something you got to keep an eye on when you're investing. You know, if there is a nuclear accident, that's what everyone could pretty much say is if there's a nuclear accident, you know, we could see a pullback, obviously, on uranium stocks. But in my opinion, this is not going to happen. This nuclear plant, this is the biggest one in Europe, worth tens of billions of dollars. And especially in an inflationary environment, it would take so long to build. Time is money. Remember this. They're wanting to divert the power. So I don't think this is going to happen. But having coverage like this on Bloomberg, you know, being the largest nuclear power plant, it's 20% of the Ukraine's electricity. They obviously want to shut this down. No electricity. It's going to be a lot harder for Ukraine to fight against Russia. This is obviously Daily Mail. Now, there's a lot of FUD on this. You know, emergency mode after last power line to the grid was cut on Monday, Ukraine says, amid fears of second Chernobyl disaster. I mean, obviously all this stuff is really clickbait. But, you know, this is also in, you know, Japan is saying the exact same thing. Z plant, extreme tense emergency power supply, fuel of 12 days. That's if the reactor number 6, if they take it down, that is what they're talking about. They're going to rely on diesel. So Ukraine Nuclear Energy Company told the news that the situation is extremely tense and that regarding the Z plant occupied by Russian forces, he explained that the fuel reserves for emergency diesel generation is enough for about 12 to 13 days. He warned that if this Unit 6, the only operating unit right now that supplies the power to the nuclear plant, were to stop and the diesel generators ran out of fuel, it would lead to a disaster similar to that of the Fukushima. I really don't think that this is going to happen. I really don't. But as an investor, as a trader, you got to keep these things on your radar. I don't necessarily think, even if there was an issue in this, it went down and got a lot of news coverage. I don't think that China is going to end their push 160 plus reactors. China is not even, they're getting these nuclear power plants up by record numbers right now. And they're getting these up and they haven't even really cared about what the rest of the world has to say about inspections. And so really what it is today, Liu has approved 6 nuclear power units to start construction in a year. And this is marking China's nuclear power development. They said it is entering a new stage. This is the second time that this actually has been done since 2008. The State Council on the mainlands has approved these 6 nuclear power units. And this is really marking the overall acceleration of China's nuclear power industry. And these units are 3rd generational power units. And this was also out today. China will speed up the construction of the nuclear power plants. So really what's going on, they're wanting to do up to 10 a year. So China, even if there was a nuclear disaster, which, knock on wood, there's nothing like that going to happen. I don't think China would overnight end anything. And it really didn't do that in Fukushima. But we can look here. This is what China is doing. Probably people don't understand how big China is pushing this nuclear energy, revival and obviously a renaissance. Keep nuclear power stations open for another 20 years. So France to send nuclear fuel to Japan. Now there are a lot of issues going on with France. Orano, France getting the shipment to Japan. They had a crane failure the other day. There is a pushback from the Japanese people because this MOX fuel is really having issues, not only getting there, but France is having issues making it. So a lot of the French reactors are actually switching from MOX back to the traditional fuel. So uranium was about 52.25 on the ask today. This is in the uranium tracker in my Discord. If you guys want access to the Discord, there is a free link below. It's expiring very soon. But a lot of you have been in there. A lot of you have been chatting up. It's been a really good day, for uranium. A lot of you were trading. So it is nice to see a lot of new faces. We're in that media attention phase, and we're going to go into what I'm doing with my uranium stocks or what I'm planning to do with my cash. This is the big media coverage.
And that renewed focus giving uranium stocks a real jolt as of late. Pippa Stevens has that story. Pippa.
Hey, Seema. Well, in an otherwise lackluster month for the overall market, uranium stocks are a bright spot. Investors are piling into the space in a bet that nuclear power will see a resurgence. 2 funds that track the sector, the URA and URNM, both in the green over the last month. Producers like Cameco and Kazatomprom up sharply. More speculative names like Paladin Energy and Denison Mines also rallying. Companies focused on building out U.S. production include Energy Fuels and Uranium Energy. Nations around the world are pointing to nuclear's importance, with Europe in the throes of an energy crisis and global power prices jumping. The EU recently designated nuclear as green under its taxonomy of sustainable investments. Japan and South Korea among the countries that have said they will add more nuclear. And here in the U.S., California lawmakers voted to keep Diablo Canyon online. And investors have taken note. Assets in global nuclear and uranium-focused funds topped $3 billion this year. And despite the recent gains, Sprott Asset Management CEO John Champalia telling me the trade isn't crowded. He believes there's more runway ahead, thanks in part to robust interest from institutional investors. But Seema, with double-digit gains in the last month, you got to wonder if maybe a slowdown is coming.
Yeah, and Pippa, I'm so curious. Russia's war in Ukraine certainly driving the price of commodity prices higher. But what role does Russia specifically play when it comes to nuclear power?
So they are a major player in the global nuclear trade. They account for about 40% of the global uranium enrichment market. So they're a key player. And U.S. utilities rely on Russia for about 20% of our enriched uranium. And remember, nuclear power in the U.S. is about 20% of our overall grid. So you can't just turn that off. And right now, utilities are still taking delivery of uranium from Russia under previously agreed to contracts. But the longer Russia's war in Ukraine wages on, you've got to wonder if maybe some of that business deal will slow. And then where are we going to get uranium? A lot of countries are scrambling to secure supplies.
Yeah, our world is, after all, interconnected. There's been, of course, a lot of focus worldwide on resource availability. Yesterday, European CEOs complaining about nickel, aluminum, how there's a scarcity out in Europe. What about
We need to add uranium to the critical bills that are actually amendments that could be passed very quickly, especially if Russia continues this war. And if there is issues with the nuclear power plant, there is also somewhat of a positive side. Now, I hope there's no issues there, but if there is more coverage, the U.S. government could say, hey, we're not going to deal with Russia and we got to really do this ourselves. China's really doing that route, not relying on Russia too much for the most part for a lot of their parts and a lot of their reactors. So what it really is saying is we could see this added to the critical mineral list very soon, uranium, and then the government could put a lot more money and a lot more focus on uranium because it is a critical mineral, no doubt, because of its use in national defense, national security, and it's also medical use. So it's not just for fuel, for these plants.
uranium? Is there a chance we could run out there?
So uranium is found everywhere, including in the U.S. But again, with raw materials, it's all about getting it out of the ground and then the multi-step process before it actually ends up in that reactor. And so last year, about 440 reactors around the world used roughly 180 million pounds of uranium, but we only mined 130 million pounds. So that is part of the bull case here, which is that the market is in deficit. Right now, we're still working our way through supplies after the Fukushima disaster cooled the uranium and nuclear market broadly. But going forward, that is going to start catching up with more and more demand. And as of right now, we're not seeing a lot of new supply come online.
This is such a fascinating story. Pippa Stevens, thanks for bringing.
So my response to this is I really do believe they're not accounting for, there's a lot more players. The demand is going to be a lot higher coming in. It's over 200 plus 205 million pounds. So, and it's over 205 million pounds, I believe. So what we're seeing, not only these reactors being restarted in record numbers across the world, we're seeing this MOX fuel issues in Japan, and we're seeing France turn back to traditional fuel. So these long-term contracts that all these utilities relied on, they might, even if they have them, want to hedge with some new, possible contracts. So all this is really happening at the same time. Here's another one by Pippa Stevens. This was really about, all uranium as well.
Hey, Tyler. Oil erased early losses, making back some of yesterday's decline that saw U.S. oil settle at its lowest level since January. Brent crude is still holding below $90 right now, with WTI right around $83.50. Natural gas prices also advancing. While they've pulled back, they remain sharply higher on the year. Platts Analytics estimating that global oil demand from gas to oil switching could jump by more than 80% as producers look for alternatives. And speaking of other energy sources, uranium stocks are bouncing as nations worldwide signal the importance of nuclear power. The URA and URNM both in the green, with the latter now up double digits on the month. Each contains companies at different stages of the production process. You've got Cameco and Kazatomprom, which are major producers. Then there's more speculative plays like Paladin Energy and Denison Mines. Now, Uranium Energy is one company focused on U.S. production. CEO Amir Adnani telling me the company's site in the Powder River Basin is ready to go, but that uranium prices are not quite high enough to incentivize production. Spot prices are right around $51 per pound, and he said they need to top 60.
We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about UEC and why I think that company and the U.S. producers are going to take back a big part of the market share. I'll show you data and proof with that. And a lot of stuff that especially new people on the channel might not know. But I want you to see this real quick. We're talking about nuclear power. This really just sheds the light on history, and rest in peace to the Queen of England. This is going to show you something you probably didn't know. She actually opened the first nuclear power plant, one of the first.
From early morning, thousands of people had been arriving to witness an historic event in the industrial life of Britain and indeed of the world. Today, Her Majesty the Queen is coming to Calder Hall to open Britain's first atomic power station. The royal party arrives at Calder Hall.
It is with pride that I now open Calder Hall, Britain's first atomic power station.
It is kind of cool that she supported nuclear power, nuclear energy, and really helped Britain. My last post in Wall Street Bets, this is a new one. It's about 136,000 people views have seen it. Now, I did post this pretty late, but it has got a lot of attention, and we're going to go through it, and I'll show you guys exactly what it is, what I'm doing, and what I put out there. Now, the 3 posts I've done on Wall Street Bets so far, I've got about almost 700 and something thousand views in the collective this past week and a half. So this was something I put out there. So what I said was that uranium stocks are leverage plays in the price of uranium. And one of the big things that's going on right now is we're starting to see the price of uranium go up, and we're seeing record demand and record supply issues out there. And we'll talk about a little bit about what's going on there in Japan. But just to give them some history, I said that uranium stocks have ran 5,000 to even 100,000% in a few years' time. And the latter is obviously not typical, but this shows how volatile they are. This happens when uranium stock grows from a tiny explorer into a producer. And the example I gave them was Paladin Energy in 4 years at 104,000%. Now, there was an investor, and I've talked about this on my channel. I've done little documentaries on it. I've done full videos last year and I think 2020. The name was Robert Healy or Bob Healy. He was a construction worker, and in 2003 invested in Paladin Energy, invested $300,000. And this was when it was 2 cents. The stock had dropped down to. Now, he was owned a construction company, construction worker. And in those 4 years' time, he became worth $417 million. Now, he leveraged that $120 million profit that he had in Paladin, and he actually bought Deep Yellow and a bunch of other uranium stocks. And it was worth about $417 million at the time. But this really just shows how big they get up there. Now, a lot of you have commented before and said, what about Rick Roll? Well, if you guys look at go back to the top holders, go to the annual reports, look who's at the top. We got John Borshoff always in the past few years before this. John Borshoff was always up there. And we've got Robert Anthony Healy and his wife. Now, they had 13 million shares of this. And this was in 2006. But you can always see that, Rick Roll, a lot of those, I've never seen them on the top shareholders there. It always pretty much was Robert Healy at the very top, especially in the early days. But I put that out there just kind of show people some other stocks. Energy Fields did a 13,000% run. UEX, which is now UEC, did a 18,000% run. Mega Uranium, 29,000%. And Denison, about a 6,500%. And that shows just where we're at. Now, I also showed that uranium stocks, in the last 2 years, 300 to even 2,000% in a lot of these. March 2020, this is where I bought. These are the top uranium stocks over 500 million market cap. In the 1970s, we saw a 700% run in uranium prices. There was stagflation, energy crisis, market crash, record inflation, a recession, record rate hikes, U.S. nuclear energy renaissance. There was 55 plus reactors coming up in those few years' time. Guess what? The number's almost even better today. 300 plus reactors possibly coming up. 150 reactors from China. It's actually 160 or so. 32 reactor restarts from France, 17 reactor restarts in Japan. This Diablo Canyon going to be extended. Palisades in the US extended. Laguna Verde, Mexico as well. 3 in Germany, 2 in Belgium. And currently, there are 55 under construction and 26 reactors coming up this year. Now, China, they're looking at 160 plus reactors. And we saw in that video earlier, that's really, they're trying to do it all themselves. Now, remember, this nuclear fuel cycle is very, very fragile, okay? It takes multiple years for the cycle from pounds on the ground exploration all the way to the end, spent fuel in a reactor. And there's 700 million pounds coming back. Now, I told him how uranium pretty much trades. There's a spot in the long-term market. Not to get too technical about UF6 and SWU. No one wants to hear that. They're not going to read, by the way. They're going to read all that. So pretty much 700 million pounds is coming into the market. And there's a lot of catalysts coming, and we've seen long-term contracting needed to be replaced. Uranium added to the U.S. critical minerals list is one. Approved U.S.-Russian uranium enrichment ban will be another catalyst. Uranium enrichment ban from Russia's side, that's a big catalyst. U.S. government buying billions of dollars in uranium as they requested recently. U.S. approving the $4.3 billion Biden administration enrichment dollars that they want to build out new enrichment and facilitate that. And risk of a supply disruption from Russia and Kazakhstan. Obviously, we talked about that so much. And we've got 92 reactors in the U.S., so I think the U.S. has the biggest upside. And do U.S. uranium companies, producers, they have a big market share? No, it's very tiny, in fact. They produced no pounds last year, so they have a big upside. And we saw 700 million pounds of uranium is coming into contracting. Now, this is 250 million pounds right here. This is 2005. And we saw the same thing right up before Fukushima, and we saw a big run in spot uranium. But we've not really seen 700 million pounds come back into the market just yet. But that's where they're coming. We're coming into this next phase where this is going to happen. And we have a supply deficits. We have an increased demand, all these reactors coming up. So US has the biggest upside. We produce no pounds, but in 1980, it was 43 million pounds. And I've said this so many times that I think that the US is going to have that big upside because of this, because they really haven't produced any. And they produced some, in the bear market in uranium, but really I think that the US producers are going to do really well. Now, UEC is the one I've honed in on, and this is a complete 180 from the past, what I thought about the company back in the day. And really, they've really turned around. Now, currently, they're about, right now, it's a little more actually now. It's about $1.4 billion market cap. The stock is trading a little bit higher. It was like $4.60 something cents today. Now, UEC has 307 million pounds of uranium. They got those new UEX assets that are some of the highest grades in the world. 100 plus million pounds, 5 million pounds of physical at $38. They can buy more. I believe they already got over 1 million pounds of that secured. Now, if uranium hits 200, that's over $1 billion, and they can use this to contract. Now, not every uranium company is going to even be able to contract. Just because you got pounds on the ground does not mean you're going to be able to contract. You got to make deals, and they're not going to want smaller uranium companies sometimes because of this risk. And the next thing, they have zero debt, $180 million in cash and liquid assets. Second most liquid uranium equity on the market. So we see a lot of day traders and swing traders come into this. Now, it's pretty much, if you want to rule out Kazatomprom and Cameco, it's really the biggest uranium stock out there in liquid form, right? That you could trade that is actually going to be able to get into production. So largest diversified portfolio in the US, highest grade uranium. That's what their recent joint ventures they have with, the biggest uranium producer in the world, apart from Kazatomprom, Cameco. They have these joint ventures. And it's in Canada. So they're expanding all their assets. 172 funds have invested in it, and that is growing a lot. The CEO, Amir, he's great at pushing the word out for uranium promotion. Now, Charlie Munger did say pretty much the last few years that the stocks that really ran the most were the ones that were promoted the most, that put out the media. That's really the only way market stocks work now. Just because it's good stock doesn't mean it's going to perform. You gotta put it out there. So they were doing well at that. They do have the former Department of Energy Secretary of Energy, Spencer Abraham, on their board. He was the Secretary of Energy for the Obama administration, so they know a lot of people there. Let's just say that, right? Now, UEC has also got these Uranium One assets recently. These are the assets that everyone's talking about, Hillary Clinton. So I said, yeah, they're national heroes. Now, why Texas? Why Texas, New Mexico, Wyoming, all these places that these projects they've got upcoming? Well, Texas Gulf Coast produced 76 million pounds of U3O8 in the 60s and 70s. And a lot of these shallow deposits along the coastline coincide with oil, big oil, right? Now, there are many. In fact, 1.4 billion pounds of uranium from all these mines still out there. But they need to be over $100 a pound for these to come back up. And there's hundreds of mines out there in the middle of nowhere, right? A bunch in Texas as well. Well, look at UEC. They've got all of these assets pretty much that no one really knows about. They have this data storage since pretty much the 80s is set there. So they could get a lot of these assets very quickly when uranium prices go over $100. Now, Amir has said that he believes big oil as well. And this is what I've been saying. I think it's a big part of my thesis for the future. They could get back into uranium. 1970s, they were, big in oil, obviously there in Texas and New Mexico. Now, because the big signal one of the big things, I think Saudi Arabia plans 10 nuclear power plants. This is a big signal that Saudi Arabia could be looking to get into the sector. Obviously, they're hedging. And what better way than to, for big oil to get into uranium as a hedge if a lot of countries are doing away with oil, gas of that nature, right? Now, the uranium trade's been a day and swing trade as well as a long-term trade, obviously. I first bought UEC originally at like 40 something cents. I think it was about 40 something cents in March 2020. Since I've sold that initial position, that averaged down, but I have day and swing trade this many times. This year, it's been one of the best to do that because it's so liquid now. Now, I think we are in this part of the bubble now, right? The bubble where the media attention phase and mania phase is starting. I've been saying this since 2020. This is what it's going to look like. This is where we're at in the market. I think we're getting that media attention phase. And after all, there's been a lot of people reading this, almost getting close to 1 million for uranium now. It'll be, once I do another post there, it'll probably be over 1 million if you add all four together in the past, week. So UEC, I think, is the one that has this potential. And we saw it close up today more than all the other ones, the other big uranium stocks, but it does have the potential to possibly be a meme type stock. Now, we don't need this. You might be mad that, a lot of people are starting to hear about this now. It's a media attention phase. Yes, it's going to be very volatile, but why couldn't a stock that has, 5 million pounds of uranium physical that's worth $1 billion at, $200 uranium, that has all this uranium in the ground, at $1 billion market cap, why could it not run up like crazy, $20 billion market cap? If Cameco went to 30, 40, 50 billion, why could it not? It could very well. And stocks aren't always priced right in the market. Now, I'm not saying that this stock is going to do a crazy move like that, but Kevin Bambro himself did say that if Wall Street Bets crew ever got into uranium stocks like they did, especially the other ones, GameStop, AMC, they would see 10x pretty much overnight. 10x, 1,000% run. I think it could be a lot higher, especially in the long term with big funds coming in and then getting all the media attention with the market crashing, in the past 6-12 months, having such a down market. We've seen a lot of new investors come into uranium. But if we really get into this enthusiasm public phase where the public really starts to get delusional and greedy, and, I think this could possibly happen very quickly if, like I said, if that happened, and then we'd be somewhere around here, return to the norm. But this return to the norm, I think, could last 5-10 years with the demand. I don't think this is going to be a few year period. I think it's going to be a lot longer, but I think we are right about here. I don't think we're here. There's no stealth money anymore. This was March of 2020, really, this stealth phase. If you invested before that, you were diluted out pretty much. People lost a lot of money previously to that. And UEC was one of those companies like others that had to dilute. But now, really, my push is now I still have a position in UEC. I've been in them. They've had a big pullback recently. I got in, and this is about what I have in my shares right now with UEC. So, I'm looking to ride a big run on this, and I still haven't sold it. And I'm letting you guys know I haven't sold that position yet. I left about $100,000 on the table from that position if I would have been day trading it and sticking to how I normally do. But I'm waiting. I'm waiting for a big move. I'm talking a big move because I do think that there is a possibility that we could see big runs in a stock like this that don't make sense, okay? We've seen other stocks. If we get a critical mineralist ad overnight, we could see 300%. I really do think, just like we saw a lot of other stocks, when that happened. We talk Westwater Resources, that thing ran 1,800% in less than a week or so from the time that news broke, that I broke that news, that ran. So I'm a little nervous, and I didn't get out at the very, very top peak like I should have in that. I took profits a lot sooner. So I see a certain situation like this as well. I did the same thing with GameStop, AMC. I was in those, way before they even started the run. So I took profits way too early. So I think that this has the potential to do that. But I'm very heavy cash. Obviously, from what has happened, we talked about there is very, very big potential for some issues and some good day and swing trades coming. Now, this is something that it doesn't get a lot of coverage either. And I broke it out there. It was about 6 tweets. So a potential MOX fuel crisis is in the works in France and Japan. This major contract issues with their MOX fuel. This plant number 4, and this is an update. If you've already seen some of the previous stuff, there's updated information for this. So 4 plants there in Japan are actually using this. They've got, these contracts. They were looking to do 12 plus reactors by 2030 for MOX fuel, but they're getting a lot of pushback. Now, this MOX fuel that's used in France and Japan, they had some big issues recently. And one of the things was the fuel casks on the ship, the crane basically had a lifting failure. So they were not able to get this there. Now, it's a lot harder to get this fuel there because this is obviously nuclear fuel, used with plutonium to make. Now, there's a shortage of MOX fuel that meets specifications. So these several 900 kilowatt nuclear reactors in France, EDF, they're being demoxed, going to traditional fuel sources. Next, there's a media blitz against MOX fuel in Japan. It's 8 times more expensive than traditional uranium fuel. And look at all these. Spent MOX fuel destined to become garbage. Too expensive MOX fuel. Electricity companies keep quiet about its price and economy. Occurrence of defective fuels to move away. The negative cycle facing France. And a series of defective products at the French MOX fuel plant. And abnormal nuclear reactions at a nuclear power plant. They're having all this. So this is going on. Now, the MOX fuel headed to Japan is going to be sent back to the plant there in Normandy, and they got to find a new ride. It's a lot harder, like I said, because of the classification of the vessel to find this. So France, this is what, France is going through these issues with it. So is Japan. So we're going to see, in my opinion, more pickup in traditional fuel. We did have the Nuclear Association Symposium recently, the World Nuclear there in London. Now, one of the biggest things that I think is coming up, it's going to be big, is the International Uranium Fuel Seminar there in Las Vegas. Now, I have a list of who all is going to be there. This is going to be big for the overall sector. This is who all is going to be there. You can see a lot of companies are going to be there, big in the uranium sector. I think we're going to get more coverage on uranium, probably more buying, more contracting, especially after this symposium that just happened. Oil was up today. You can see a lot of the energy commodities back up. Now, uranium still for the month up about 6%. This will be updated though next on Monday because it's $52.25 uranium prices. So that's kind of where we're at. The commodity price is starting to go up. But if you see the overall market, it did really well today. And you can see uranium stocks here on the right. A lot of the uranium stocks, U.S. producers, they closed still green for the most part. It was a mixed bag. And then you go down, you've got other companies. We did see SMR down 4%. Very odd. I told you guys, I think that those warrants are starting to affect the stock as well. So all the Australian stocks and over there in Europe, they were up very well. But we have started to see the short volume increase in a lot of the uranium stocks. Look at the short volume here. And as I said before, if you guys want access to all my right here, all of these uranium stocks, my watch list, when I add them, pull them, there's a link in the description below, and there's a discount. I'm an affiliate now with TradingView. I don't think that there is going to be a meltdown at all. I'm still very bullish on the uranium sector and uranium stocks especially, but I am still keeping an eye open. That's why I have so much cash just sitting on the sideline. I like to buy into strength and volume, record volume, and I think that's really where it's going to get very interesting. But I'm very happy with day and swing trading the entire markets. So in some of our gains today, a lot of people, these are some of the gains for people in the Discord. And we're going to start doing this on a daily basis. Before, I thought it was kind of like annoying, if people wanted to see what all the gains people were getting. It is nice to see people doing really well, day and swing trading, especially uranium stocks, sometimes 6-figure gains. And a lot of those you can go and search back, but that's going to be in the link in the description below if you want access to all that private Discord, see all that when we're trading. But like 2020, I think is happening all over again. There were millions of dollars made by individual investors there in the Discord as well from trading stocks like Westwater Resources, stocks that were extremely volatile. I think uranium stocks could do the same thing again. And that's why I'm kind of just really kind of sitting around wanting to have a big position in a lot of the US producers. But the day and swing trading is really where everyone's making money, as you see. Give me your like number below. And is this Z plant issue going to affect the uranium sector like Fukushima? And did you guys sell or buy anything? Let me know below.